brilliant authors, if you have questions about how to write and format flashbacks, or if you should write flashbacks at all, or how to write a flashback or about a past event without using the word had 10,000 times, then I think you are really gonna like this video. I am Bryn Donovan. I am a publishing professional by day and an author by night. Go ahead and subscribe. I talk about all kinds of tricky writing issues, and I think you'll really enjoy it if you're a writer or an aspiring author. All right, I wanted to do a segment on flashbacks because they can be tricky to format and because they have become a little bit controversial in the past year. In other words, I've seen a lot of people suggesting that you should never write a flashback at all. I'm just going to give you my personal opinion on that. Take it for what it's worth. When I'm reading through submissions, when I'm reading manuscripts, I'm not coming across a lot of bad flashbacks. I don't think that writers really overuse them. I never see manuscripts where there's 6 flashbacks, and I think for the most part, when people are writing flashbacks, it's because you kind of need a flashback there. And so I don't feel like cautioning against people writing flashbacks. I think that with writing, there's a lot of advice out there about don't do this, don't do that, etc. And some of it is completely wrong advice. Things can get so prescriptive and there can be so many rules that it can make people feel like they don't want to write at all. And I think that can get a little ridiculous. Sometimes a flashback is exactly what you need to pack a little bit of an emotional punch or to give the reader empathy for the character. So go ahead and write a flashback if you need one. But let's talk about how to format them. I'm going to start by talking about the wrong way, which I see a lot, which is putting the whole flashback in italics. There's a couple reasons why we don't want to do this. The first reason is it's just not very comfortable for a reader to read a really long passage in italics. Italics isn't as easy to read as plain type, and that's why we don't use it all the time. And the other thing is that when you handle a flashback in that way, it is a little bit confusing to the reader. Sometimes they don't even know exactly what's going on. If you're submitting to an agent or an editor, it's going to look a little bit amateurish if you handle your flashbacks like that. The other way that you don't handle flashbacks is just by using the same past tense you've been using through the rest of the story. Now, if you're writing in present tense, as a few of you may be, then you can simply use past tense for flashbacks and for talking about past events. But most of us are already writing in past tense, and so we don't just stay in that same tense when we go into a flashback or we talk about something that happened 2 years ago, because it gets a little bit confusing. So we do have to make that switch to past perfect tense. And past perfect tense, just to be clear, is the tense that has had in it. So simple past tense is she walked the dog. Past perfect tense is she had walked the dog, or she had walked the dog. So you're going to ask me, okay, so if I have to use past perfect tense, how do I write my whole flashback without saying had 10,000 times? Because it sounds terrible. You're absolutely right, that does sound terrible. And that's not what we're going to do. And so I will tell you how most writers and editors handle this. And for whatever reason, I didn't learn this in college. I somehow learned a little bit later. But here's how you handle that flashback or past sequence. So the first 2 sentences, you put them in past perfect tense. Or the first 3 sentences. There's no hard and fast rules about this. So you go ahead and do that. You say, she had met him at the party last year. He had been wearing a reindeer sweater. Something like that. All right. After that, you can switch to simple past tense. You've already told the reader, hey, this is a flashback. Hey, this is something that happened earlier. And you can go ahead and make that switch, and you can continue on with your scene in past tense and say, he brought her a cup of hot cocoa, and she told him that she loved the Christmas Carol that was playing, or something like that. That wasn't that great, but you can go ahead and continue in simple past tense. Now, at the end of your flashback, or at the end of your discussion of what happened before, you have a couple of options. You can switch back to past perfect tense for a couple of sentences at the end. You don't always need to, so you're just going to have to listen and see what sounds best and what works best. If you end with a new paragraph and a sentence that's something like, she didn't know why she was thinking about that Christmas party now. Okay, so now you've made the switch back into the normal time frame, and you don't really need to finish out with any past perfect tense at all. By the way, did you notice that now is in that sentence even though it's in past tense? This confuses people sometimes because it seems weird to use now with past tense. And it is weird because English is terrible and weird, but it's actually perfectly correct to use now in using simple past tense. All right, so that's how we get in and out of flashbacks. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions about that, go ahead and ask in the comments. I always try to answer them. And if you are working on your novel for blank page to final draft, if you're doing the program, then you are probably about 1/3 to at least 1/4 of the way through. However far you've gotten, good job. Just keep on going. I would love to hear about how that's going too. All right, guys, like the video so that other people can find it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week and happy writing.